Okay. Thank you, Stephen. My name is Joyce, and I am an alcoholic. Very happy to be here. And when Stephen called me and he mentioned Henry's name, I knew that that was someone that I knew. So I was very gracious that Henry had passed me on to Stephen, because usually we ask each other's permission to give people's telephone number. And once we know our members, and well, it's okay with me when the person call me, if and when they call me and they give their name and I'm associated with them, I know it's a good deal. So I just like to express that, because sometimes you do get calls and they just give you information and never say who they are. But I'm happy to be here. I'm happy for Zoom. And I went and took care of my business today that I do. I do bereavement classes since 2012 when I started going to bereavement. But my first drink was cream de cocoa. I was 18 years old now in the bar. I could go to the bar and I had a cream de cocoa. I heard people talk about it. It was a sweet kind of drink. And I had learned about other drinks with my junior high school friends that I met in school, and they used to drink in the schoolyard and like on Saturdays when, of course, school was closed. And I used to see them drinking, and I didn't like what I saw, people throwing up and what have you. By the way, I'm an only child. I was raised by another family when I was 10 to 16 years old, because my mother died when I was 10 and her sister, my aunt, died 3 weeks later. Mother January 10th, aunt February 7th, 3 weeks apart. And my aunt was a chorus girl at the Apollo in the late 30s. I learned about just every dance that they was doing. Tapping was a big thing back then. Bill Robinson and all the rest of them, and the big bands. I grew up under the big bands. They would be at the Savoy and the Golden Gate and Rockland Palace and the Audubon Ballroom, all those places. And it was just nice, just lovely. And then I learned that Arthur Murray used to teach dancing on Broadway, had a nice big sign up there. And being born in Harlem, that was more or less a lot of the arts on the Apollo, where people came through learning how to sing in church with their families and then come through, and they've been big stars ever since, especially when they would have amateur hour at on Wednesdays. And, people get up and, well, they boo them and this and that. But that's the era that I grew up in, and very fond of music, any kind, opera, whatever. A little bit of each, nothing too much, because the program taught me don't engage in excess of anything. Uh, and I love that, not to just go nuts, so to speak. Just a lively word, nuts, because I found out that in the second step, after being suggested to come to Alcoholic Anonymous by the priest, Father Dugan, of the Catholic Church that I joined in 1958. The girl older than me, a year older than me, that I grew up with, two girls, their grandmother and mother, and they treated me just like I was theirs. I was like the baby girl. And in 1949, I remember when Geraldine, the 1 year older than me, got married, and I had had my first son in 1949, my first child. And I went with her to St. Charles, to St. Anthony's Novena. I used to go to that by the church, because they did a lot of recreational things like the Golden Gloves and all that for the young people, and a lot of recreations that we did at that church. uh, den mother, den father, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, all those nice things that help children go to camp and what have you. I never went to camp, but my grandsons did go. That's another story. Um, my drinking got worse. I started drinking on a daily basis. I used to drink after dinner and have a cigarette. But I wanted to be like my girlfriend and smoke a cigarette as soon as I woke up. For why forever, I have no idea. And have that drink in the morning, and it got to the place where it overtook me. 1967, I hit Harlem Hospital. I had drank so much, not at one time, but it began to take me down, and I didn't have any information about anything that could help me. The lady that used to sell half a pints downstairs, they used to go to Tuckahoe and bring back half a cases and cases of liquor. So on the weekends when the whiskey store was closed or on Sundays, she would sell it. But she had a run-in with one of the police. Back then, there was only two police on the beat, Pendergrass and Wallace. And when you heard their names, people, they got out the way, the ones that was doing something wrong. They moved fast. But they had them billies and they were using them. So that was a segment of what I saw as far as the law was concerned. I took numbers for 11 years. That was a way of life, single action. And for the men, it was merchant marines or longshoremen. My father was a Pullman porter and also a red cap. And my grandmother used to say to me that your father's no good. He left you when you were 6 months in your mother's stomach. But after coming into AA, I learned my father's story. His father wanted him to finish school. And because my mother and father got married in 1930, and I was born in 31. And his father, I heard his part of the story because I heard a guy named Dennis say that he hadn't spoken to his father in 14 years. I never knew about not speaking to nobody, especially family. Because I grew up with 5 girls out of the block, and we were the high steppers. We gave tea readings. We gave dances at the Dawn Casino, and bus rides to Sesame Place, Ride Playland. We did all that community stuff. And they had schools. They had like a building for kids after school that they can come after the school would have after school. Then you could go to another community place to dance. And remember the long records came out back then, the 78s and all of that. And it was just, so nice, so nice. And then they built the post office right across the street from where I live. I saw them build that in 1941. It still stands. But when I hit the hospital in 1967, my son had went to the hospital in 1965. He used drugs. And when he went to the hospital, they called it yellow jaundice. That's what they called it then, 1965. And a few of the friends in the block, his friends and them, they were passing away. And they were actually yellow in the casket. And my drinking was telling me not take the people out the casket, but just crying and screaming and hollering and what have you, because I didn't understand much of none of that. Even though my aunt, who was the chorus girl, she wound up passing away from lockjaw, from heroin, when she passed in 1942, my mother's sister. And the ambulance came and they couldn't get her mouth open. I heard the doctor saying, put a leather wallet in her mouth. Put a silver spoon in her mouth. And they could not pry her mouth open. So just like my mother went to the hospital And the telegram came because it wasn't, they didn't, of course they wouldn't tell you you was in the woods like they've done in the last 30 years when you were in the woods or how much time you had. They just sent a telegram. Western Union knocked on the door, rang the bell, and said Anna Blizzard died in Harlem Hospital, and my aunt died. Mildred Stewart died in Bellevue Hospital. And I had a dog. I grew up with a dog, and that dog howled back and forth and ran up and down the apartment. Oh, it was something else. And me being 10 years old, I didn't understand none of that, what was going on. And then my grandmother moved. And then when my aunt died, she moved again by herself. And from 10 years old to 16, I stayed with her friend, best friend across the hall from where we lived. And then I went back to my grandmother. I was on the verge of getting married, and I didn't know people's cultures at that time. All I knew about was Harlem, 125th Street, or in the Bronx, Hearns, over there. We used to buy Easter outfits and what have you. So my mother-in-law to be wouldn't sign for my husband and I to get married because I already had a son. And like I said, I didn't know people's cultures of what they believed in and what they didn't believe in. She was from Natchez, Mississippi, and migrated to Louisiana. But anyway, my husband turned 21. I was 17, I think, or 18. And he said, come on. And we went to City Hall. And at that time, you had to have a blood test in order to get your marriage license. And doctors lived around the corner from where I lived. Dr. Bell, Dr. Jones, Dr. Patrick. He was a pediatric doctor. And they came to your house. Those doctors came to your house back in them days with their satchel and what have you, till the drugs came out and the people started snatching their satchels with their medicine and their needles and stuff. And that was a big disaster. That was a pandemic under the addiction of drugs. And like I said, my son got caught up in it. And these were the things that would like it says in Alcoholics Anonymous, is a family disease. And it tells us that we were a tornado in other people's lives. And when my sponsor called me one time and said that to me, I know I had read it, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. A tornado that knocks down buildings and stuff. And we was a tornado in other people's lives. And when the doctors in the book went to see the reflections of alcoholism, they came back that we were grandiose, childish, and immature. That was the presence of what the doctors saw. And I learned that they only had, one of the first place that they opened up on Manhattan Avenue on 118th Street, where we people that needed to come to meetings, they had doctors that were alcoholic, and they were offering B6 shots and B12. That's all they had at that time of knowing about alcoholism. And then two men, the gentleman that started Co-op City and one that was a member of Mid-Harlem, Elliot Green, they passed on quite some time ago. They went to Governor Carey. I guess you could look that up in your Google. And to explain to them, because those people had came out of mental institutions when I came in. There was no detox. They were from Pilgrim State, Central Islip, some of the other places that they named. And there was a gentleman named Mr. Ruffin that we would go with him back to the hospital that he was in to carry the message once a year for the to bring the message to the people that came in or left or what have you. And we have, back then they called it moral support when you went as a group with people that was going to speak. So those were the things that I was learning about Alcoholic Anonymous. Excuse me. Besides, when I made my first meeting, August the 14th, 1971. I came in the year Bill died. January 24th, 1971. I came in August the 14th, 1971. I hadn't drank for 11 months at that time on my own. I was in the hospital 33 days, I forgot to mention that, and they were taking blood from me like every other day, vials of blood, and told me that I had, it'll come to me. Yeah, I had, it'll come to me. But the doctor said that if I ever drank again, I wouldn't live to see a year. When I came home, I drank again. I was drinking in the hallway and sneaking it so nobody would know that I was drinking. And my oldest daughter, God rest her soul, took me to Metropolitan Hospital and they couldn't find nothing wrong with me, so she brought me back home. Like I said, one of the girls that I grew up with invited me to St. Anthony's Novena, and that's where it took place. Father Dugan gave me a meatingless book because I told him that alcohol was not allowing me to make mass. And he went right into one of the drawers in the rectory and pulled out a meatingless book and gave it to me and told me, circled it and told me what meeting to go to. And the night before I had talked with Father Dugan, I had went to the Apollo to see 25 Men and One Woman, the jukebox review. One of them was my son-in-law's cousin, and four of them came home with me, and we was drinking and what have you. And that next day is when I knew that I had to do something. And when I walked into AA and saw people and heard them talking about what life they was living, like I used to tell to the bartender, tell the story. And my grandmother used to come in there looking for me with a rope to hang me. That was, she would come in there and say, girl, you better come home because I've gotten married now. And I had three more children, three girls. And that was her way of frightening me, what have you, because my grandmother was all I actually had. She was the matriarch. And when I moved back with her, I did everything that I could. And one of my coworkers at Chase, when I told her the story, what I just said to y'all, told me that my grandmother did me a big favor. She didn't try to raise me with all of the emotions that she had losing her two daughters. And I understood exactly what she meant because she believed in work and she never stayed off her job. She was a hand ironer. Used to iron on the stove and then the mangle and then the other things and wound up down where I do proctor work today on Bleecker Street, all down there, Alligator Laundry. I think about her when I be going to that job. But after getting out the hospital, like I said, and then re-drinking, and then going to St. Anthony's Novena, I wanted to join that night. And Monsignor Drew and Father Kelly told me I had to come to religious instructions. Now, I did work for the elementary school that my children went to, and I got a job there by helping the first graders while going to see about my son's mischievousness. They called it that then, or wayward. They didn't have medical names for them like they have today. They was just bad. Didn't want to do what they were supposed to do. And while going to see about him and helping the kids in the lunchroom, the first graders hold their tray and what have you, the principal sent for me because we lived right up the street from that school. It still stands today. Now it's named Mahalia Jackson, 140th Street and Frederick Douglass. When I went there, it was PS5. They remodeled the whole thing. It was PS123 where my children went. Then it had another name, but today it's Mahalia Jackson's elementary school. So after my son got wayward, I was able to get him in a place called Lincoln Hall in Lincolndale, New York. What a beautiful place for boys. They each had lived in 12 in a cottage with a dog in it. They played football. They could smoke cigarettes. They would be able to they would say, light up 2 times a day. And when he was home, 12 and what have you, you couldn't smoke. But the people, the staff, they let them smoke. So if they let them smoke, then we knew it was all right for them to smoke. Because here they are somewhere trying to reform, and smoking wasn't one of the things that they were trying to reform them with. They was trying to make them a lot of sports and what have you. And they even gave my son a name called Strong. He was so good with football. And we used to go there and take food and cook. It was family day and what have you. My grandmother and all of us would go. So, and then when he came home, I would get a big banner, welcome home, not knowing nothing about enabling him as if he didn't do nothing wrong. But I learned about that in Alcoholic Anonymous, about the enabling, how we enable, whether they feel sorry or they wasn't that bad or whatever. But when we hear each other talk and tell our stories, we each learn something. And I know that's what it's all about. Learn how to listen. I didn't have a problem with listening to elder people. I grew up in that era. There was no such thing as talking back at all. They just looked at you. So after coming out of the hospital, my daughter taking me to Metropolitan, and sister invited me to St. Anthony, I was so amazed that I heard the people telling their story. And it was strictly about alcohol, how they even made it, how they talked about alcohol and cough syrup, Listerine, and many, many other things. But that stood out to me because I would gargle with Listerine so it wouldn't have alcohol on my breath, and take citric magnesia to run it out of me. Household remedies, eat a lot of collard greens so it could street remedies, household remedies to get it out my system. And then when I wanted to join the Catholic Church, and I went to religious instructions regularly because the children in elementary school went every Thursday at 2 p.m. So I was very familiar with that word, religious instructions. And I was baptized and confirmed. And the ladies that raised me came to my confirmation, and the girls I grew up with. What a day. I was so close with the girls that I was was raised with. When their mother took sick, the oldest daughter told me to go because they wanted to resuscitate. And she said, I can't do it. I can't sign. She said, you go, you go. And when I went to see Beatrice, the mother, it would never forget. It was December the 31st, 1989. And she was just laying there. And that night she passed away. So neither one of us had to say to resuscitate her or what have you. And then my father got sick and he passed away. And my father's from Newport News, and my aunt and cousins, we all took care of that. And I used to give Father's Days AA, but it didn't have nothing to do with just Father's Day. It just had that for people back at that time when we used to do that. There was a lot of, you couldn't see a child and all that kind of stuff that they have now, custody and this, they didn't have that then. And some of the guys used to talk to me about it. And I got the idea that we women get together and have a day for Father's Day. And we would have, I would get the projector from Cine to show Bill W.'s pictures, movies rather, and we would do that. It was all about AA, and it was just honoring the men for Father's Day. And we would have cakes and stuff like that. We would chip in. And it went on for about 15 years. And then they start, well, as new people come in and as old people stay, I mean, be in there, not so much, I mean, stay, whatever. They kind of blocked it. So I had called in General Service and they said, if they don't want you to announce it on the secretary break, put it on the board. They used to put when there were meetings to go out and what have you, they had a bulletin board. That's what I'm trying to say. And if you wanted to take it when somebody in the group and there was some left over, you would go up there and you would take it off the board and you would go and do the speaking engagement. I remember when they talked about when they started doing 12-step work, it was two people that had to go together, not to go by yourself, because the old timers talked about how people went and wound up drinking with the people they went to try to help back in them days. And Bill and Bob carried a pint of whiskey. So if anybody was that bad with the shakes and the delirious tremor, the DTs, they would give them a drink to get them to the hospital. Because like I said, they didn't have no detox. And that's how that was going on, the 12-step calls when I came in. So, and suggestions was in the 12 steps and the 12 traditions when I came in. This is a program of 12 suggested steps. And I've called and years later, I've called and found out what year they took that out. And they said 1983, they took the word suggestions out. And they took the word honesty out of the third step, made an honest decision. They took that word out. That wasn't there when I came in, but you know, we heard talk about it. So all in all, after making meetings, my first anniversary, my grandmother didn't want to come, but she wound up coming to my first anniversary. And she was at the lady's house that raised me. And she came downstairs and said, I'll go, I'll go. And it seemed like something was holding her head up. I knew it had to be God. And she came and as the meeting went on, I celebrated my first anniversary at the St. Nicholas group, the oldest group in Harlem. And when I called for her to come up, the speakers and my family, my grandmother came up, and I saw in the audience that a few men had to help stand her up. And she came up, and I was going to another anniversary, and my middle daughter took her home because we were going to the Oxford group when it was on 90th Street and Broadway for another anniversary. And then when I came home, she was in the bed and we was talking, and she went to the bathroom and took her quite some time. And I called my daughter that brought her home, and her girlfriend had spent the night that night. And she went to the bathroom and called me and said, oh, Miss Chicky, your grandmother's pretty sick. And at that time, I lived in one of those railroad flats where there's a long hallway and the kitchen and the bathroom and a bedroom is off from it. And I went there, my grandmother was sitting on a toilet, straight up. Took two last breaths when I got there. And phew, I celebrated my first year. And I called my daughters and them, and they came in and looked. And something was saying to me, turn on the gas. And Spirit said to me, you can't be disloyal to them people who helped you 365 days to get to this day that you're at today. And you surely cannot be loyal to yourself. And that thought just went by the wayside. But I felt like I had lost whatever, everything. And my sponsor heard about it because that news get out quick. And my sponsor, Joe Chapman, came up. And then Liz Bailey, I called her to tell her because she spoke for me. I spoke for her that July. I had 11 months when she asked me to speak at her 20th anniversary. I didn't know what 20 was. And I told my home group of George Hasty and them, and they said, girl, you ought to be on it. She asked you to speak, and they was telling me what to say and this and that and other. But I learned what to say when I was telling them bartenders my story. And this learning how to listen to how I heard people share their strength, experience, and hope, and the horrors of their drinking. That first step when it said we admitted we was powerless over alcohol, something hit me in my gut and said, it is alcohol. I knew my life, I didn't use the word unmanageable, but I knew it was wrongdoing. Not paying the Con Edison and the telephone. Them letters was coming in the mail. And then you'd call them and try to talk to them and all that kind of stuff, walk around with that baggage that we come into the rooms with. Of course, we didn't tell nobody because we didn't want nobody to know. And I can talk about me. I didn't want nobody to know because I would be trying to take them numbers and pay them bills a little bit at a time, and they would let you pay like that. Layaway plans and all that was back in the stream of life at that time. Layaway, furniture, whatever. People were still selling clothes like they're out there today, selling on the streets. So since that, I lost 3 grown children. My son in 1949. I mean, he was 49, I'm sorry. Yeah, born in 49 as well. Lost him in 1987 from the drugs and everything else that went with it. And my oldest daughter from peritonitis and pneumonia. Back then in the 50s, people when tuberculosis ran rampant like cancer was in the beginning. That was something. People had to go to Arizona. My husband wound up with it. He had to go to Serenity Lake. My daughter wound up with it at 8 years old. And then they came out with a vaccination called PAS and INCH, and we all had to have cameras down in our chest to make sure that we didn't have no cavities by being exposed to it. Tuberculosis was something. Oh my goodness. And my daughter, 69 years old, from 8 years old with that, and been in Bellevue Hospital. They used to bring the circus there and a whole lot of things for the children. In fact, my daughter wanted to bring some of the children, the patients home with her, kids. Yeah. But that's how long they had, that's how long it was so nice that they made the circus come there and different things at Bellevue. My husband was up in Serenity Lake. You had to go where it was, well, the grown-ups had to go somewhere where there was a lot of sun. But they got that bad boy down. Yeah. And tuberculosis was something. And I know even though it was the military, they found that quinine for the military guys too, when they had malaria. Oh yeah. I'm a believer in the vaccination for the pandemic. I had my tests undetectable, not detectable. At first I was kind of scared because I got diabetes, high blood pressure, and cholesterol. And they talked about underlying symptoms, and I was a little worried about that. But I don't have no doctor's license. So one day when I was going to my doctor for my appointment, I seen so many people on the line to get tests, and the spirit hit me. I went the next day and did it. Next day and did the nose. And then when I was going to the Board of Elections, because somebody had lost the payroll book, not the money, just the signatures, and we had to go up there and sign. And they had a truck out there doing the nose and the antibody. And they give you the results in 15 minutes. So after I did what I had to do at the Board of Elections, I told the guy, I said, I'm ready now. So he took me in there. They were packing up and getting ready to go. And he said, no, I'm going to get you in. And then this lady said, whatever time it is, she said, I'm not going to leave till I can tell you your results. So she said, the pandemic is negative and your antibody is negative. And I reached out and hugged her like we do in the rooms when we do that. Because you never know. After hearing all that's been said and done and this and that and the numbers, you never know. So today I worked for the Board of Elections for a few years. I'm a proctor with NYU. I've been a proctor with the Board of Exams. I've been a proctor with teachers. But since the laptops and stuff are out, so they closed down with instead of manual. But I've had my experience and I thank God. I do 2 bereavement classes. I did one today. And I went for myself for a year and a half. And it was only for the children that has passed away. And there was a few ladies that sons had a heart attack on the basketball field and all kinds of stuff. One of the ladies that was a facilitator, her 3 sons and her and her husband went for a trip. The twins drowned. And you hear all kinds of stuff anywhere. And then my 49-year-old grandson, 2017, took his life. And he had told his 2 older brothers that he was, and they couldn't talk him out of it. And his second brother is deacon / minister. And I'm going to close with this. On August the 29th, he called me to take me to dinner. And I was at the motor vehicle place to renew my license. I didn't get my license till I was 61 years old. In case anybody still want to drive, take a chance. Because the nun in the rooms taught me, after I went 3 times, she told me, keep going, go back, because it's a freedom you'll never regret. And I could be a witness to it. And it hasn't been peaches and cream. I've been rear-ended a couple of times. I never hit nobody, but I've been rear-ended. And one day at a time is the core of my life. And everything else is built around it. Because I know myself, God demonstrates what each and every one of us, he wants to know. And he's demonstrated in my life what has taken place and the hope that still lives within me because I know what he's done because I've experienced it. And I just made 89 August the 11th. So I'm 89 years old, 49 years sober, and I haven't found any type of anything to want to take a drink, even though the door swing both ways. They had labeled Bill a chronic, insane alcoholic. It's in the book. And he got the prize. I often wondered how he knew he needed to talk to somebody when he first had that light with Dr. Silkworth. And he asked Dr. Silkworth, have you ever seen this? It's in the book. You know, I'm not telling his story. I'm saying what's in the book for us to read and learn from. And Dr. Silkworth told him he never seen nothing like this. But hold on to what you got, because it's better than what you had. And that conversion that he had, that's the word they got in there. My sponsee, Leonard Gregory, he used his full name after a while. He was Bumpy when he came in, not Bumpy Johnson. And he told me that word means repair, give back. And that's what happened to him. All those different places he had went, and the hospitals and the this and the that, and give all the good news he had gotten, but still couldn't stop, fell into place. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you very much, Joyce. I sure appreciate that. It's a real treat to have you share with us tonight.